Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in from. Thank you so much for joining us today. I don't normally see each other on a Thursday, but here we are, hot off the press. The visa bulletin for new fiscal year was released yesterday. The dates moved to November 15th, 2022. So we are going to be talking all about that today with our panel of experts. So please get your questions popped into the chat. If you had a question in prior to us going live, please pop it in again to make sure that we don't miss that question. We will do our very best to get to all questions today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deirdre O'Regan. I am your host for today. Excited to have our expert panel, who are no strangers to this show, join us in a little bit. But in the meantime, please pop in where you are calling from. We love to see where our listeners are listening in. I see from the UK, Ghana, Philippines, Saudi. Thank you, Setad. You're listening in from Nepal. Emmanuel from Nottingham, UK, South Africa. Wow. All over the globe. And I know this is a hot topic, and we were waiting with bated breath for this visa bulletin. And so we did see some movement, which I hope is good news for some of you, and maybe a little disappointing for others who didn't see the movement that they had anticipated. So, but we're going to talk all about that today. So before we call in our expert panel, just as a reminder, AMN Healthcare International is the only organization who offers both direct and staffing opportunities. We have got opportunities across the United States. So if you have not already, please get your application in amnhealthcare.com/international. Our panel of recruiters, our expert recruiters, are on hand to assist you every step of the way. So again, we always say, get your place in line, don't delay, apply today. We got the visa bulletin yesterday. And so that is what this show is all about today. So without further ado, we are going to call in our expert panel. So we are joined today by Chris and Mike, who I just said were no strangers to this show. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank both Chris and Mike for being available at such short notice. We wanted to make sure that we were live with you 24 hours after we received the visa bulletin. So very, very grateful for Chris and Mike for switching up their schedules and making time for us today. So thank you so much. The questions are coming in fast and furious, which we knew they would. So we are going to try and get to as many as we can today. We do have a member of our team on the back end that is going to be addressing any questions in the chat related to licensing and credentialing. So Amanda, thank you for switching your schedule around, and Amanda will address all those questions for you in the chat. So Mike and Chris, is the visa bulletin that came out yesterday, is this what you had expected? Did you expect it to be different, or is it exactly what you had expected? Mike, we'll give that to you first.
Well, I thought here's what I had planned, honestly. I thought when this bulletin came out and we had this show that I was going to have to buy a bunch of balloons and confetti and streamers and have a big party of excitement. And so notice in my office, there are no balloons and no streamers, so no excitement. I will say that the final action date chart does not terribly surprise me, only because Chris kept predicting this. I thought it was going to move forward further, so he's clearly was right and I was wrong. My biggest disappointment is in the date for filing chart only moving forward a month. So that's my big picture overview.
Thank you, Mike. And Chris, you were right.
I mean, the stop clock's right twice a day. Because when Mike and I were preparing for this, we swapped a few texts and emails over the last day or so after this came out. I think that November of 22 is about where I thought it would be. I think on some of these other sessions that we've done, I've sort of thought it would be either very late 22 or early 23. Like Mike, so in and of itself, I think that's fine. That's about a little under 2 years, which is frankly historically a very favorable time for processing. It's not ideal. We all wish everyone could get their visas, immediately. On the other hand, as Mike points out, I think the dates of filing chart, I think, was probably less optimistic than I would have thought. For those of you who don't know, there's really two charts in the employment-based side. There's actually two on the family and two on the employment-based side. And on the employment-based side, we have what are called the final action chart, and that's what we've been talking about so far, and that's November of 2022. The dates of filing chart, or what's sometimes called Chart B or Table B, is it's the chart. It really represents two things, maybe even three things. The first thing that it represents is it's supposed to be when the State Department believes that your case is reasonably going to be acted on within the fiscal year. So the fiscal year runs October 1 to September 30th. And so one thing we can take away is that, at least based off what the State Department is saying, is that they actually only think that by next summer, the EB3 category is only going to progress until March of 2023. That seems underwhelming to me. I would have guessed it would have been probably more towards the latter half of 2023, perhaps not into 2024, but I wouldn't have even been surprised if ultimately that number had gone all the way, or that date had gone all the way into maybe January of 2024. So that March of 2023 date, so that's a little unusual. By the way, the other two things that 2023 date tells us is, one, it's supposed to have some correlation between when, if your I-140 is approved, that your case moves ahead at the NVC stage, although historically we've seen kind of a lot weaker correlation between those two events, between that date and the NVC processing date than I think it was originally intended to be. And then the third is, if you're here in the United States, that date signifies when the USCIS has the right to accept your 485, which most months they do accept it, not all months. They did accept it this month. And so if you're in the United States and you have a priority date actually before March of 23, not November of 22, you're actually allowed to file your adjustment of status, although your I-45 cannot be approved, i.e. you cannot have your green card issued. But the filing of your I-45, if you're in the United States, let's say you're on an H-1B visa or a TN visa, if you're Canadian or Mexican, or you're on a student visa or some other visa category, you can file your adjustment of status. And that grants ordinarily some benefits to you. It makes your travel a little easier in a lot of instances. It may free up some work authorization abilities for you. It also theoretically means that when your Chart B date becomes current, that your case probably will get processed faster, because theoretically the USCIS is working on your I-45 in the background. So but go back to my first point, which is it's supposed to indicate when in the next fiscal year the USCIS, or rather the State Department, thinks that date's going to be in March of 23. So I'll make another bold prediction here, that it's actually going to be further than March of 2023. And I think one of two things may be happening. Either one, the State Department and in consultation with the USCIS sort of don't want to be overwhelmed here in March with too many I-45 adjustments of status. And so they're moving it to March of 2023, but they may move it further ahead as the fiscal year moves ahead. Or two, and you can, and this is what one of the things Mike and I were talking about, and you'll never be wrong with this analysis, which is simply that maybe the State Department is just miscalculating.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Lots of great information there for you. And we had a lot of questions on my priority date is current. When can I expect an interview at NVC? Mike, can you talk to that a little bit? Assuming it's based on the embassies, but if you can validate that for our listeners. Lots of questions around that.
Yeah, so the answer is going to clearly be embassy specific. However, you've got to be DQ'd before you're going to be eligible for an interview. So even if your priority date's current, if you're not DQ'd yet. So the first thing you want to make sure is that you are DQ'd. And if you're not, resolve that. If you then are DQ'd and your priority date will become current in October, then you have to, and either your attorney or your account manager, account rep that you're working with is going to help with this. and provide instruction. But in some consulates, you're self-scheduling, and other consulates, you're not. There's a variety of different things that will happen. If we're looking for an overall time frame, I would definitely not expect that you're going to see an interview in October. Keep in mind that consulates have individuals who were current and previously interviewed who then got held up for a variety of things. They needed something else on their medical. They needed a new 221G. There was pregnancy, so they had to wait to finish another test. There's just a variety of things where individuals were already interviewed, already current, and then retrogressed during the summer, which has pretty much completely been wiped out now, which is good news. And they're going to be in front of line for you of newly current individuals that the consulates are going to kind of clean up, for lack of a better term, older cases before yours. So I would not expect that I'm current, I should get an appointment in interview in October. I don't think that's the case. I think it is fair to say that in most consulates, you can expect an interview within 90 days would be my just big picture number guess.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Chris, we have a question here from Sela. And I know in previous shows we mentioned that there was going to be quarterly movement. But Sela says there's no mentioning of quarterly approach in this year's October bulletin, in contrast to what they did last year. Do you think they will move the dates monthly or quarterly? And Sela's priority date is January 23.
Yeah, I think the dates will move forward as to whether her January of 23 date becomes current in the November visa bulletin or December visa bulletin. I'm not sure about that. You know, they probably do have a backlog, so I really like what Mike was talking about there. I think that's really a really good point. So in terms of jumping at quarterly, I think historically we've seen it move quarterly. And so I don't believe last year it moved anything from October to November, but I do think it will steadily move throughout the year. And I forget the questioner's name, Sela. I think she should take some comfort in the fact that it is March of 23 on the chart B, and so I would feel very confident that sometime either later this year or early next year that she will be current and have her interview and get her green card.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. Mike, Zeynep has a question. Hello, I'm adjusting my status through employment-based immigration, and I'm originally from Turkey. My priority date is April 24. Should I be following the dates for filing chart B for submitting my I-485 application?
So there's two parts to this. First of all, the Department of State issues the visa bulletin, as they did yesterday, and you're going to look at chart B or the date for filing chart. However, that is not sufficient as well. The USCIS may or may not honor the date for filing chart for a given month. So on the USCIS website, there is a page where it says what they will honor for the next month. And so this month, for October, they indicated that they will honor the date for filing chart. And as Chris mentioned earlier, they generally do, but not always. So you'll look at both of those places. Often there's a lag time of 4 or 5 days from the Department of State issuing the visa bulletin until the USCIS issues whether they'll accept your case. So you want to look at both those places to determine whether you're eligible to file your 485. However, if you said you have a priority date of sometime in 2024, I can be extremely confident, even though we, hate to make really broad predictions, that you're not going to be able to file a 485 in this coming fiscal year. We're not even close to 2024. Our date is February 1st, 2023, and not likely, it might move forward this year, but I don't think anyone thinks it would move forward 10 months. So you're going to have to make sure that you have underlying status, whether that's an H1, whether that's a TN, whether that's maintaining a student status, whatever your current status is, you're going to have to make sure that you are maintaining that status. And I would say it's likely at least a year, maybe longer, before your priority date will become current, where you can file your 485.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Lots and lots of questions. JM, I am waiting for my New Zealand citizenship in 3 years from now. When is the best time to apply and process my US visa application? And I'll give that one to Chris.
Yeah, so this question's pretty easy because the answer is always the same with these, which is there's no reason to wait. You should go ahead and move ahead. If you want to come to America, I would go ahead and start the immigration process here in the United States now. I would be transparent with your recruiter or your U.S. employer. I don't know if or why a New Zealand citizenship is important to you, but you'll want to be transparent with them. But here's the thing. In the U.S. immigration system, the date you file your I-140, which is to say you file for your immigrant visa, that is called your priority date. And that date stays with you, frankly, forever. And so by locking in a priority date today, even if you don't intend to come to the United States for 2 or 3 years, your next petition even would be backdated. But here's the really important point. We are here in September of 2024. I think based off this visa bulletin, it's probably safe to say that a petition filed today, a U.S. immigration petition filed today, probably will not actually get a U.S. immigrant visa interview until late 2026 or more likely even into 2027. And so that timeline should line up pretty well with your New Zealand citizenship process. Candidly, I don't know too much about that New Zealand citizenship process. Although, with respect to New Zealand, just 2 days ago here in Cincinnati, the U.S. men's national soccer team played the New Zealand men's national soccer team to a 1-1 draw. I don't know if that's important or not, but I figured I'd give you that piece of information as well.
On that sporting fact, I'm from Ireland myself, and big rugby fan. And New Zealand is the team to beat.
They are the All Blacks, right?
Yeah, they are. Ireland's beaten them a couple of times, but yeah. So thank you for that question. Emmanuel, lots of questions as well about approval timelines. So Emmanuel filed I-140 on 20th of November 2023, still has not received approval notice. What could be the reason for the delay? And secondly, could there be a chance that the approvals could exceed 10 months? Mike.
Yeah, the last question, absolutely, the approvals could exceed 10 months. The first question, I think a relevant context for Emmanuel is, has anything happened in the case since it was filed? Has there been a request for evidence that can sometimes delay cases, et cetera? The most common request for evidence as cases are taking longer now is for updated financials. Because if you file a case, for example, today, let's say I'm filing a case today, September 12th, 2024, and my client is a nonprofit hospital. The hospital's latest tax return they're going to have available is probably 2022. So if no one is looking at this I-140 filing until next year in 2025, it's going to look like that tax return is very old. It's going to look like 3 years old. So getting a request for evidence for updated financials is fairly normal. And as the processing times get longer, you're going to see more of those. Those are not a cause of alarm. It's just a matter of, submitting a new response. So Emmanuel, I would look at that first. If you've not had, there are processing centers posted by the USCIS. The processing times change based upon where your case was filed and where your case is currently sitting, because they transfer cases around a lot. So the processing times vary. I would not consider upgrading your case to premium processing, even though that will get you an answer fast, because it does not change your priority date. And your priority date is not current, and your priority date is not likely to be current this entire fiscal year. So spending the money on premium is of zero value, other than a little peace of mind that you know the answer. So I would not be alarmed by your case pending since November 2023.
Thanks so much, Mike. So 2 key things that Chris and Mike just said. Chris had said there's no reason to delay. That is what you can control today. So you can control getting your I-140 file, getting your application in with AMN Healthcare International, and get your place in line. And then Mike also said that he would not recommend premium processing because you might get your answer, but it does not change your priority date. So two very, very good tips there for you. We've been saying it all along, but now you've heard it from our panel of experts. Chris, there's a lot of questions from, we've got a lot of medical technologists listening in today. So thank you for joining us. And the overarching theme is the process the same for medical technologists as it is for nurses? So Ashish has a question. A medical lab scientist on an H-1B in the U.S. and employer agrees to process the green card. How long will it take to get the green card?
So this is a really good question, Ashish. So first of all, for those of you who don't know, the H-1B is a non-immigrant temporary visa. That's not the immigrant visa green card. These are two distinctive visas. It sounds like Ashish is here in the United States on an H-1B. The first question we ask in terms of the processing time of the green card is the first question we always ask, which is, what is your country of birth, not your country of citizenship? So I don't know where Ashish was born, but the key thing is that everything I'm going to now say is if he was not born in China and he was not born in India, and again, even if he was born in China or India, but for instance, he became a New Zealand citizen, like one of our earlier questioners, that wouldn't matter. It's your country of birth. So assuming Ashish wasn't born in either China or India, then we look at this month, we look at Table A, which says March of 2023. And what Ashish has to have is a priority date before March of 2023. Now, if Ashish were a nurse, there's two steps to the green card process for a nurse in the United States. The first step is filing the I-140, what we sometimes call the Schedule A I-140. And the second step is filing an adjustment of status. And if his priority date is before March of 2023, he's allowed to file the adjustment of status. And his priority date is before November of 2022. He's not only allowed to file the adjustment of status, but the U.S. government's allowed to actually approve that green card. However, for medical lab scientists, and frankly, every single occupation out there, with the exception of physical therapists and RNs, there's actually a pre-step, what we call the labor certification, or what's sometimes called PERM. And that process can take about a year. And that will also establish your priority date. And so that pre-step has to happen for all occupations, including med lab scientists. So if he were starting that case today, we would file the labor certification today, which would establish his priority date as September 12th, 2024. Once that's approved in about a year's time, we would file the I-140. And then when the I-140 is approved, we could file his I-45. And his priority date would be September 12th, 2024. If indeed Ashish has begun that process earlier, then his priority date moves back. And again, key thing, when he wants to look, or anyone who's interested in this wants to look at the visa bulletin, because those timelines I've given were for non-Indian and non-Chinese natives. For Chinese natives, that date is not November of 2022, but it's actually April of 2020. And for Indians, unfortunately, it's an awful situation, but it's November of 2012. So that's 10 years longer than all other countries.
Thank you, Chris. So hope that helps all the medical technologists that are listening in today. There's a question here from Rodawin, and there's not a lot of information on, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. You got an email from USCIS in date 11/7/2024. So depending on where you are, the month and the day could be transverse. So that could be November, or that November is down the line, but I'm assuming that you received this in July. She's one of the winners of a random selection of green card petition. So Mike, what could that mean?
Did she apply for something called the diversity lottery? That's likely.
Don't have a lot of information. So if Rudan, if you're still on, if you could pop in some more information, we'd be happy to answer that question for you. So there's this for Chris. Anuradha is asking, there's 140,000 visas each year for employment-based. I want to know where they are using these visas while they are not moving forward. Is it because they have used more visas than these numbers in the past years?
Not used more visas. They've always been capped at 140,000 going back over 30 years. The only exceptions to that, there was a few years in the 1990s and early 2000s, and then actually there was a few years around COVID where that number was actually higher. But that has nothing to do with why the visa number is not moving forward. What it really reflects is the amount of applications they are receiving. So it's a supply and demand issue, right? So the supply is 140,000 and it's always 140,000. The demand is the amount of labor certifications, perms, I-140s, et cetera, that are filed each year, and the amount of employment-based immigrant visas that are filed each year. And so that's why it's not moving forward, because what the U.S. government is saying is they have a bubble of I-140s that were filed, frankly, probably between November of 22 and early 2023.
Thank you so much. Mike, Chris has a question for us. My priority date is December 2022. I'm deciding if I will wait for an interview here in Abu Dhabi, considering they're slow, or should I transfer to the Philippines? Can you give him some advice on that?
Well, the first thing I would look at is what's your current employment status there in Abu Dhabi? Are you in a contract where you can leave without any repercussions, or are you still going to be there in Abu Dhabi having to go back and forth? So I think there's a couple practical considerations. Where's your family at? Are they with you there, or are they back in the Philippines? So that's one factor I would look at. Second factor I would look at is how long is it going to take to get the case transferred? We generally discourage people from transferring cases because often it does not work well. There's a process for it, and sometimes it works smoothly. Other times it does not. Sometimes you have no choice. Your contract ends in UAE and you have no choice, but you're going back to the Philippines. You have no choice. And in those situations, you have to deal with the fact that you're going to transfer. For other individuals where it sounds like you do have a choice, you got to look carefully and understand that you may delay the situation. Granted, the appointments in the UAE have been inconsistent is a nice, kind word for this Thursday morning. There's a lot of factors. Definitely talk to your account manager and the attorney that's working with you to make sure that you're fully understanding the risks. Transfer might be the right answer, but it's at least worth discussion.
Great, thanks, Mike. So hopefully that helped you out there, Chris. So this is a kind of a long question. It's from Rakaya. So thank you, Rakaya. And this will be for Chris. My priority date is September 22. 6 months ago, I was current, and the embassy asked for a DS 5535 for my husband. 1 month after submitting the form, I became not visa eligible. Now I'm current. When should I expect to be interviewed? But secondly, my newborn is 2 months old. I already sent the documents to the agent to add her to my file. Would that delay the process? Congratulations to you and your family, Rakaya.
Yeah, so you will now become current on October 1st. I don't know what your DS 5535 asked about, and so that's just such a unique question. Trying to predict how long your case will take is almost impossibility. But what I might do is have your attorney or your case manager inquire with the visa office as to see what the timeline may be. Although candidly, whenever a case gets something like that 221G, as we call it, it can sometimes just take a while because it's not in their normal processing. And there's something about the case that they felt the need to ask additional questions on. And so without knowing what those additional questions are, and without knowing the embassy either, it's unfortunately pretty difficult to suggest what the timeline might be.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, and hope that helped you out, Rakaya. So we have a question here is, what if my petition is RFE'd? How long does that delay the process, Mike?
So the USCIS gives, it's either 84, 86, or 87 days. I don't know. Chris might remember the exact number. If we had one of our associates that are real smart on this call, they know exactly. But there's a certain days that the USCIS gives an employer to respond. However, if the RFE is simple, like maybe they want an education evaluation, maybe they want clear copies of your transcripts, maybe they want, as I mentioned earlier, just updated financials, then usually you can respond within a couple of weeks, and then they'll resume processing of your case. But there is a maximum time frame by which to respond, and it's somewhere in the 80s.
We have Joanna. Joanna, hello. I'm current since the release of the October Visa Bulletin. Congratulations to you, Joanna. Can I send for expedite now, or should I wait until October 1st? Chris.
Well, I mean, you can send for expedite, but the reality is there's nothing really to expedite. If your only reason that you want to be expedited is because you're in a rush to come to the United States, that almost surely won't help. So don't think that indicating that you need an expedited visa appointment will help. Having said that, it probably won't hurt either.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. Binu has a question, Mike. My priority date is June 2004. I moved to Canada, and recently I received an email from NVC saying my file would be closed within 1 year. What do I need to do?
Assuming Banu is not from India or China, Banu has been current for a really long time and has taken no action, which means the NVC assumes that you have no interest in continuing to immigrate to the U.S. If you do, in fact, have an intent to immigrate to the U.S. and you have the exact same sponsor and the same job in terms of employment from back in 2004, which is possible but maybe unlikely, then you want to reach out to that employer and finalize your process and complete the process. If you have no intention of immigrating to the U.S., then simply there's nothing to respond back to the NVC. Just let them close your case.
Thank you so much. Lots and lots of questions about your predictions for the next visa bulletin. So, Chris, I think you mentioned it, but let's touch on it again. Lots and lots of questions coming in. What are your predictions for next month's visa bulletin?
Yeah, I mean, I think little to no movement. It wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't move at all. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe it moves from mid-November to late November or into December. But I think I wouldn't expect it to leap dramatically ahead from where it is today.
Thank you. So we've got another question here, Mike, and it is from Nelson. My priority date is December 22, and I have a newborn, which I want to add as my dependent. How do I add him, and will adding him change my priority date since I'm documentary complete?
Yeah, well, congrats, Nelson. I'm sure you're getting a lot of sleep right now, so it's good for you. The adding a child does not change your priority date at all. Adding a child varies by what consulate you're at. It is generally a very easy process to add a child. So you will want to reach out to your either attorney or a case manager. Your priority date is likely to be current this quarter. That's my prediction. We're only a month away from it now. You said December 2022, so you're close. So I would certainly be taking some action now so that you are ready to go when you are current.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Chris, Trevor is asking, hello, my question is, once my priority date is recaptured by my new employer, do I need to go on the process again for me to be DQ'd again? My embassy location is Manila.
Usually, yes, is the answer to that question. Although candidly, I don't know specifically how Manila's, or frankly, how any of the embassies work on this. There tends not to be a very tried and true path. But generally, when your new I-140 is approved, that will trigger a new NVC process. Having said that, we've certainly seen people over the years show up at the visa appointment that was scheduled for their old, let's say, their old priority date. And then when they walk in, they bring the new I-140 and I've seen instances where the officer on the computer can look and see that you did have an updated employer on it. And so I guess my answer to this is if you have a visa appointment set up at the embassy in Manila, and Manila is convenient for you, let's say you live in the Manila metro area, or the Manila embassy is convenient for you, I would definitely go to that appointment, but bring both your old and new I-140 approval notices, and it wouldn't surprise me if they approve your case. If you're around, maybe you're in the Middle East, or you're even just in an island or a place in the Philippines where it's less convenient, that becomes a little more difficult to do. But I would try to reach out to the embassy and ask them specifically what they would like you to do.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a question here from one of my esteemed colleagues. So Ed is asking, what do our expert panel think the visa bulletin advancement will be for the year? So let's start with Mike.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Ed, I appreciate that you acknowledge mine and Chris's expert level. So thank you so much for that, with tongue firmly in cheek. We're all hopeful that the March date moves forward, because that would be an indicator then that the final action dates would move forward. Historically, that has not been the case. But we've had some unusual things over the last several years that make the visa bulletin more difficult to predict. We had COVID that completely changed things. Prior to that, we had a series of things being current for many years. We have a transition from the person that ran the visa bulletin for 25, 30 years, and there's a new team in place now as the other team retired. So there's a whole series of things that it's difficult to predict. I'm going to be optimistic and say that the February dates are going to move forward by a couple of months. I wouldn't predict much more than that, because the demand has been so strong. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that February is going to sometime get to April. I don't know, maybe even May if you twist my arm. And then the final action dates would move forward following that, but that still puts us at less than 6 months, or it puts us in that kind of neighborhood. So that's my prediction, Ed. So write that down.
And Chris, let's give it over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see it largely the same way Mike does. I don't see it dramatically different than Mike does.
Perfect. Thank you so much to both of you. So we have a question here from Adj. I had my interview already. I'm current now on the October visa bulletin, but my medical May 2024 will expire in November 2024. What will happen? And someone is pinging me here. What will happen if my visa expires before reaching the USA? Let's give that to Chris.
Yeah, so this one is somewhat straightforward, which is if your visa expires before you reach the United States, you will not be allowed to enter the United States. So do not let that happen. So that's the answer to the question. Hopefully, they will allow you to enter the United States, but your schedule will allow you to enter the United States before it expires. But you should not attempt to enter with an expired visa, or you will not be granted entry.
Thank you so much, Chris. We have lots of questions as well about dependents aging out. So I'll take Mary's question, and hopefully this will answer a lot of the questions that are coming through on this topic. So my priority date is February 2023, but my eldest is already 21 years since last July. Can they still be included on the petition? Mike.
So anytime you have an age out situation, you're going to want to talk to the attorney handling your case to look at your specific situation. And I would advise you, if you are starting the process and you have a child that's 16 or older, that I don't believe the priority dates are 5 years away, but I think 16 is a good number to start talking about to your case manager and your attorney about that. There is something called the Child Status Protection Act that allows your child's birth date to change based upon how many days your I-140 is in process. The Child Status Protection Act, however, does not take into account retrogression. So children can and often do age out as a result of retrogression. One of the things you want to know, if your child turned 21 in 2022, which is kind of what it sounds like the fact pattern was, that's a long time ago. But I would not want to prejudge as to whether they're aged out. But if they are, you want to start looking at what are some options for them. Is there an option for them to come here to the U.S. as a student? Or what other options might they have? So reach out to your attorney and your case manager if you have a child that is close to aging out, or in my opinion, anytime after the age of 16, just to be sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. So hopefully that helps. I know there was a lot of questions coming in the chat regarding that topic. So hopefully Mike's advice helps you all out. We'll take a few more questions, and then I want to be very respectful of the time here, as this was very last minute. And again, thank you to both Chris and Mike for adjusting their schedules to be able to meet with us today. But Ruth is asking, I think what Ruth is asking, when it comes to visa bookings and currently living in another country, do they have to go back to that country again for visa interviews, or can they stay in like the UK? Chris.
Yeah, so there's a general rule, and as with everything, we do see that the government sometimes deviates it. But Ruth, the general rule is this: on your I-140, there is a spot where you are asked where you would want your interview to happen, and often that, for most of our cases, the country that you hold a passport and the country where you're currently living is the same, and so the request is done there. So, for instance, the applicant is living in Manila and they hold a Philippine passport, and therefore the interview is there. Sometimes the applicant is living in, let's say, the UAE, but they hold a Philippine passport. Typically, we will discuss this, ask, in our questionnaire where you would like your interview to happen. And some people in that instance may want their interview to happen in UAE. Other times they will want them to happen in the Philippines. So the question you should ask yourself, Ruth, is if your I-140 has been filed, ask your case manager or your attorney what they indicated on the I-140, because that will be the default place where your embassy appointment is. And that's the answer to your question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. Bonnie has a question here. Bonnie's EB2 priority date is February 2013. What is your prediction for the date being current? Mike.
Well, EB2 2013 is already current, and it's been current for a really long time. So I'm guessing that's a typo.
Okay, so if you want to put in the correct dates, we can be sure that we get that question answered for you. So I think we had this question before. If someone is here on a non-immigrant visa, can they apply for an EB3 while in the US on a non-immigrant visa? Right.
Yeah, so there's two parts of the process. So one part is, can they apply for the immigrant visa? The answer is absolutely they can. The second, maybe more difficult question is, when they apply for the visa, where are they going to want their interview to take place? Do they want their interview to take place within the United States, or do they want it to take place outside the United States? And there's a lot of components to how that decision is made. My experience is most of the time the applicant wants the interview to take place in the United States, and there's at least two different big factors if that can actually happen. The first factor is your actual priority date, so and your non-immigrant visa status. So if you are an Indian national and you are here finishing up college, you may want your interview to take place here in the United States, but because it's a 12-year process to get your green card interview set up, you are almost surely not going to be able to have your interview here, because the priority dates are working in 2012 right now, and we are, of course, in 2024. So that's a component of it, which is what's your priority date and what's the likelihood that you would be able to have an interview before your current non-immigrant visa status expires. So you need to think about that. The other thing you need to think about is, how did you come to the United States, and what intent did you express to the immigration officer? So, for instance, if you're here on a tourist visa, a B1, B2 visa, almost always that will bar you from having your interview in the United States. I say almost always because there are of course, exceptions to that rule as well. And so I think now my last point, which is my third point, which is the most important one. This is a real complex issue. You shouldn't decide this on your own. You want to talk to not only your case manager, but your attorney on this to see if he or she can help guide you as to not just what you want, but what is the best for you from a legal standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And Mike, Bonnie has updated her question. My EB2 India priority date is February 2012. When will my date be current?
Okay, so she is February 2013 from India, and we only went to July 2012, so she may have a couple more years.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate all of the questions. We might have time just for one more. There's one more. Could I switch from an EB3 to an E1 while we're waiting for EB3 to become current?
An EB3 to an E1. I mean, theoretically, yes. An E1 visa is a bit of an unusual visa for a healthcare worker. So I would definitely get legal advice, because it's, there's a desire to change for a visa, and then there's the legal question as to whether or not you actually meet the standard. It would be unusual for me for a registered nurse, for instance, to meet the E1 standards. Not impossible, but unusual.
Perfect. Thank you so much to you both. I appreciate, of course, your expertise. And I know we didn't get to every question. We would need more than an hour to get to every single question that came through today. But we'll do our best to get as much of them answered that we can. But I do want to thank Chris and Mike. I'm sure we'll be meeting again next month when the next visa bulletin comes out. I hope everybody got some really good advice, some good information here today. Always one of our favorite shows to host, and of course love having Chris and Mike join us. It looks like a beautiful day there in Cincinnati. Looking out your office window there, Chris, looks beautiful. So thank you both for all of your advice. Thank you for joining us at such short notice. You heard it here first, hot off the press, 24 hours after the visa bulletin was released. So I'm looking forward to next month when we get to spend more time together. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Deirdre.
Thank you. All right, you heard it here first. So lots and lots of great advice given by our expert panel. I'm hoping that it helped a lot of you on the line today. But some things that you want to take away from that, right, is don't delay. Get your place in line today. That is what you can control. You can control getting your application in, getting your I-140 filed. That is in your control. And please make sure that you are doing that today if you have not already. We're going to wrap up the show in a little bit with a little inspirational video from one of our also regular guests on our show, Nurse Paul, who has been through retrogression and actually was an extended retrogression of 10 years. And now he's been in the US for 7 years. So he's going to share a little bit of his story to wrap up the show to keep you all motivated. Coming from someone who's actually been through it, I'm sure will resonate with a lot of you on the line today. But we do have a few questions coming in regarding the AMN international process. So yes, if you have not already, please make sure that you are getting your application in today, amnhealthcare.com/international. As we said, we are the only organization who offers both staffing and direct opportunities. So our team of expert recruiters is on hand, waiting to help you, waiting to guide you through the process. So don't let one more day pass. Take control today and make sure that you are getting your application in and letting us assist you every step of the way. So we are going to talk about some upcoming shows here. So here are our upcoming shows in the next couple of weeks. We have got our Onwards and Upwards show, our regularly scheduled Onwards and Upwards show on September 27th. And then we've got the Lafora Talk Show on September 17th. So please make sure that you are tuning into that. We want to hear from you. what should we cover in our upcoming topics, right? So we want to make sure that these shows are meaningful to you, that you're getting the information that you want. So please submit an email or put something on our chat here for what topics you would like to cover in our upcoming shows, and we would be happy to accommodate. Of course, every Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have our AMN Academy. It is our NCLEX class, the first Monday of each month. And then the third Monday is with Nurse Paul. You see his picture right here. We're going to wrap up the show with an inspirational video from Nurse Paul. And then we've got our English preparation classes on the second and fourth Monday of each month, hosted by our partner, Niner. So before we get to the video of Nurse Paul, we wanted to, and there's a couple of questions in the chat. What happens if I am abandoned by my employer? So while that's, we hope that that doesn't happen, but in the unfortunate event that that does happen, we would recommend that you explore the staffing route. Right. So what happens when in the direct hire, which is if that's your choosing, then absolutely, we're the only organization that offers both. But should you choose the staffing route, then in the unfortunate event of that happening, your I-140 process is not stalled. It continues. So we will place you with another client. Of course, you get to choose where that is, but we'll present you with options. But that's probably the safest route for you to make sure that your immigration process continues and where you don't need to find another sponsor and start your immigration process over again. So we hope that that helps, but staffing is definitely one of the options that you should explore should that have happened to you in that unfortunate event. Again, we're the only organization who offers both options. So our expert recruiters are here waiting to help you and can guide you through every step of the way. And there is a couple of questions about I applied. I haven't heard back. So that, as you can probably imagine, we've got a lot of applicants and our team is diligently working through getting through all of those applications. If you've got NCLEX and English, we are prioritizing those. So please make sure that you are highlighting that on your resume before you submit to us. But we are working diligently to get through all of those applications. So I know that there is still a lot of questions coming through, and Amanda has been on the back end answering all of your licensing and credentialing questions. So hopefully that's been helpful to you. But we're going to leave you with an inspirational video from Nurse Paul. Hopefully that is inspiring to all of you. But what we will say is stay motivated, stay connected to us. We'll make sure that we have all of the information to you, and we'll be live again once the next Visa Bulletin comes out next month, along with our expert panel. So get your questions in for that. And until next time, dream big, dream smart, and choose AMN International. Until next time.
All right, nurses, some good news. October 2024, Visa Bulletin for EB3. Visa category jumped almost 2 years forward. So from December 2020 to November 2022. That's great news for the international nursing community. Although it's still not current, we jumped almost 2 years, right? We're still retrogressed by more than 1 year and a half. If we're considering September 2024 right now, we're still retrogressed by quite a bit, right? But, as someone who went through retrogression myself, I had to wait for my visa to get here to the US for almost 10 years, right? So I know the feeling, frustrating, depressing, right? And at times you feel like you want to give up your American dream. But guys, look at me. I've been here for 7 years, already an American citizen, practicing as a nurse practitioner. I got my own house here in the US. Guys, the American dream is real, but hold on to it, right? Don't let it go. Although there's retrogression right now, the good news is eventually it will move forward and eventually you will come over here to the US. So while waiting, make sure that all your documents are current. Don't let your nursing licenses expire. keep your nursing bedside experience so employers would not abandon you. That way, when the visa bulletin moves and you become current, you can move swiftly to the front of the line and can get here to the US much quicker, because you already know it goes back and forth to being retrogressed, and you don't want to get to that point where you're already current, and because you were taking so much time to get your documents in, you're retrogressed again. So that's my advice to the nursing community. Don't lose hope. You're gonna get here soon. All right, good luck.